why did you first start attending classes here at Wushu Central Martial Arts Academy?
So this is my favorite story to share because I actually didn't know that I was going to an intro class when I went. I think I was like 8 or 9 years old. Some backstory, every weekend I'd hang out with my friend at the library. So imagine young Jasmine dressed for the library in kind of like baggy pants, baggy t-shirt, was not prepared. My mom drops me and my siblings off at the studio, and I was just like, oh, this doesn't look like the library. But we clearly had an amazing time because we joined and we stayed. And I remember distinctly like trying to impress you because I was like, oh man, he's the boss. I need to do A+.
That's awesome. Well, you were always a really, really good student. And it's so funny just to think that you basically got blind dated into Wushu, right? That's hilarious. So what was like the most challenging part of your Wushu journey?
I'd say there are a couple things. Like at the beginning, like the first half, it was mainly kind of having that growth mindset and acknowledging that mistakes aren't necessarily a bad thing, that mistakes are something you can learn and grow from versus, I was like a preteen going through puberty. There was a lot of like, I wanted to avoid embarrassment. I wanted to avoid like, not being the best. And I remember being one of the younger students in the adult class because my parents wanted me and my siblings to stay together. And so I think you had allowed me to kind of be one of the younger people.
Yes.
And so it was, so that was like the challenging part for the first half. And then I'd say the second half is kind of like maintaining motivation as I'm going through all of these life changes. Because as like a teen, as like a female teen, it wasn't necessarily the most popular thing to be doing. I'd say at that time, at least.
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's really interesting you talk about, the growth mindset aspect of this as well, too, because that's one of the things that I always feel is one of the greatest benefits of training in martial arts. And maybe this is a fault of like, I have to say it like Asian parenting, right? Because Asian parents are very much like you're good or you're bad. You get an A, and if you don't get an A, you're out of the house, right? I mean, just, there's this whole dichotomy that they have here, as opposed to, oh, you didn't do well, but that's okay because we can get better at it. The slap down happens really quickly in Asian families. Oh my goodness. Wow. So despite all these, and despite having to, struggle with maintaining, keeping your eyes on the prize, you train with us for 6+ years. And by the way, those of you who are just joining, I'm interviewing Jasmine Pham. She was a student at Wushu Central Martial Arts Academy, earned her black belt. She became an instructor here, and then she went on to college, and now she's a doctor of physical therapy. So this is her success story. So if you have any questions, please feel welcome to drop it right on into the comments. We'd love to hear from you, and we will read your questions on the show. So you were with us for 6 years and earned your black belt. So what was it like to after all that time to finally reach that goal?
It was very gratifying because it definitely reinforced that idea that if you make a plan and you work towards that plan and you follow your goals, like despite any setbacks that you have, that you will eventually be successful. And I think when I reflect back on finally getting myself to want to sign up for the black belt test, because as a teenager, I think I had just joined high school. And it was the time where it was for me, it seemed like a big commitment because I had to write an essay. There was all this preparation. There was all the conditioning requirements, and I didn't want to sign up for something where I would potentially fail. But I think I remember talking to everyone else, and they kind of were very reassuring in that even if I did fail, there are other times that I can try again, but also if I make a plan and I work towards it then.
Yeah.
is
No,
good.
absolutely. I think you're so spot on. I think for me in my life as well too, the number one thing that I do to succeed is to commit to it, right? And if you just think about it and you're like, oh, you're just trying to prepare everything and line up all your ducks before you even take the first step, you'll never actually get there because nothing will ever be perfectly lined up, right? There's a saying like if you're gonna drive to San Francisco and you wait till all the green lights are green in your direction, like you're never gonna leave, right?
Yeah.
So you have to kind of take that first step. And as you start going, you start and you're like, oh God, I'm doing this, right? And then that helps drive you into that next step towards success. So that's so awesome. So, going through that journey to black belt, like what do you feel personally are like the most significant character traits that you gain from it?
Super cliche, but I'd say that a lot of my strong points that I think allow me to be successful are all of the traits that I gained through Wushu. So, for example, that growth mindset, being adaptable, professionalism and discipline, um, just generally being a very good person are
Yes.
like major traits that I learned throughout Wushu. Because I definitely like when I think of Wushu, I think of family, and there's this one particular practice that I can't forget because I think it was just me and a couple other students, and I was literally rolling around on the floor. Like I think I was like 11 or 12, and then you came out and you told me that that was not appropriate because like this is a space that we need to respect. And I remember being so embarrassed, and like I think from that point on, you know, it's one of those like burning memories. Like you do not roll around in your workspace or your practice space.
Yes. That's so funny. And sometimes it just takes someone with a mean gaze to make you learn and remember this for the rest of your life, even
Yeah,
now, 10, 20 years later, right?
yeah.
That's amazing. Oh my goodness. So that's wonderful. So, after you earned your black belt, then you actually went on to become an instructor to tell other kids not to row on the ground,
Yes.
right? So why did you decide to make that leap? I mean, that's another, like, you're like, oh, it's such a commitment to go to my black belt. And you get to black belt, you're like, oh, now I'm gonna go to the next level and go to becoming an instructor. That's another huge commitment. Like, what went into your mind to make you decide to become an instructor?
There are a bunch of layers to why I became an instructor. One of them was being that my parents saw my black belt accomplishment as like the end of the journey. However, for me, like I saw that as the beginning of more learning because going into Wushu, you tend to idolize like the higher ranks as like, oh, they know everything. Like once I get there, that's it. But then once
Mhm.
you pass your black belt test, you realize that you don't know anything and
Right.
that you've just gotten the foundation and the basics to really learn all the cool stuff, like all the fun things.
Mhm.
Um, and so when I got my black belt test, I was really sad to hear that my parents actually wanted me to stop. And so becoming an instructor was my way to like stay in Wushu Central. Like you can't get rid of me that fast.
Yeah. I'm so grateful that you stayed because you were such an awesome teacher. What did you like the most about teaching?
I really liked the adaptability, like with every student that you're working with, you get to be kind of like you help them become like their best self, the best version of themselves, and then you also kind of learn like this question is actually it's a very loaded question for me because it drives the reason why I went into physical therapy.
Mhm.
Was that when I was trying to decide, like every Asian, I was pre-med, right? So
Right.
I was trying to decide like what do I like to do and what do I want in terms of work-life balance and being successful and happy long term, because I don't want to hate myself. Like I don't want to be working like a 9 to 5 job and like really hate going to work.
Mhm.
And so teaching, what I really loved about instructing at Wushu Central was that it allowed me to work together with the students and give them those tools, that encouragement that they need to really succeed in the future, even like without me.
Right.
And that really translated into physical therapy, where it's like with physical therapy, you work with patients, you're not like fixing them, you're working with them as a team to give them the tools that they need to become independent and like to not have to come back to you.
Right. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It's such a tie-in that makes so much sense, right? Because when you're teaching martial arts, it's not like a one-time transaction, where you're just like, oh, you work with them and then you go on to the next customer, right? I mean, you are heavily invested into the well-being of this individual, setting them up for success. And in the martial arts, we can be talking about the physical skills they're learning, but we're also talking about the character traits, right, that they're going to carry with them for the rest of their lives, and then setting them up so that they're going to be successful in their future life. So that is so
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Cool. So those of you that are just joining us, this is Jasmine Pham. She is a Wushu Central black belt, a former Wushu Central instructor, and recently earned her doctorate of physical therapy degree. So, super excited. If you have any questions for her or for me, drop it right into the comments, and we'll be happy to answer those on the show. So, I'd love to hear some words of wisdom from you. I mean, you stayed with us until you went to UC Davis, and then you went to NYU, all great universities. Parents would just love it if their kids would get into great colleges like you did. So what advice would you give to parents hoping to get their children into a good university?
I'd say that it's important for the parents to create a supportive environment that allows their children to explore their interests and kind of like really go into them if they like it, but then also give them that opportunity to stop if they don't. So for example, I remember there was a time, I think maybe the second or third year that I was in Wushu, where like I wanted to quit, and I was complaining to my mom, and my mom was like, yeah, if you want to quit, you can quit. And then it took me aback because I was like, hold up, like you're actually supporting me in quitting. And then that's when I
Right.
really realized that like I'm accountable for my decisions and my Wushu journey. And so it forced me to reflect like, do I really want to quit, or am I just frustrated with where I am physically because I'm not at the black belt level where everyone's doing aerials and all the cool combinations and things, right? And so I think giving your children that freedom to really explore and to stop if they're not interested in it is really important, because like I found that although grades, like good grades and good test scores are helpful, they're not um, they're not everything. So like the most successful people and peers that I've talked to are the ones with the more well-rounded personalities. They've experienced some sort of failure. They've experienced different aspects of life versus just like someone who spent all of their time studying at home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is such like the Asian thing to do, right?
Yeah.
Just study and then get test scores and don't go out because, there's weird people out there and it's a waste of time, and it's so awesome. I think it's just wonderful that your parents had the foresight too, to really think of having you do more than just studying. Because obviously you were a good student all along and you had all those, but then to really be able to take something that could build you as a human being into something greater than just a bookworm is tremendous. So I want you to imagine like you go in a time machine and you go back to change the past, right? You zap the day when you went into Wushu and you never got into Wushu Central. You never started, like you never gained those character traits. Like where would you be today?
It's a very hard question to answer, I think, because Wushu has become such a big part of my life that I literally cannot imagine my life without it. So, for example, I don't know if I ever told you, but Wushu is literally all I ever talked about in my interviews and like
I did
my
not know
club
this.
activities. And so, like, for example, my interview into NYU was like the most stressful thing ever because I had never really had a very formal interview up until that point. And like, this is like the gateway to my future, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And everything tied back to Wushu, like, oh, your leadership experience. Oh yeah, like I was the president and the coach and a member of Davis Wushu, or like I had been an instructor. And one of the interviewers was he actually competed in Wushu. And so we
Score.
spent we spent a good like 5 or 10 minutes explaining to my professor like what Wushu was, straight sword, how competitions work.
Right.
And like that was just that really helped me kind of feel more relaxed.
Yeah, right,
And like
right.
adapting into the real world wasn't as scary because Wushu is such a small community that I knew that wherever I went, there would always be someone who knew Wushu and like would welcome me and like we could chat, have a snack or something like that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, and so yeah, so back to the question, I imagine that I wouldn't be as confident or social as a person because Wushu definitely made me not have stage fright. I'm very comfortable with talking in front of a large group of people and like the discipline, all of those things. Like I'm sure they were there, but Wushu definitely helped kind of make them blossom.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. That is so amazing. And just there's definitely something to be said of Wushu being a really tight-knit community. Like as soon as you meet someone who's Wushu, like you're like, oh, family, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I know we know each other, right? Even if you've never met them before. It's just that you have so much common ground at that point that you just feel connected to them. So that's super, super, super awesome.